today I'm just going to look at a bit how we use innovation in actually harnessing ESG. So I think the previous panel discussion was actually great because it actually created a nice little segue into towards my presentation. So there's many things that I don't have to explain in terms of ESG, and so it just creates a nice little flow. So I'm just going to give you one slide on what is the impact catalyst, so you just understand what it is, so that you understand how it actually fits into the whole ESG space. So basically, the impact catalyst was created by the CSIR and Anglo American, Exaro, and World Vision, and Office of the Premier and Limpopo. And it was basically to create a platform for organizations to work together that actually addresses these needs that we actually discussed in terms of ESG. So social needs, how do we create jobs, how do we improve well-being of communities, and basically everybody realized we can't do this alone. If every organization tries to do this alone, we will never succeed. So how do we work collectively to actually address these and pool resources to really make a difference? And so basically the Impact Catalyst was born to basically drive collaborative, cross-sectorial initiatives that drive socioeconomic impact as a collective, as a public-private partnership. So all the things that you'll see today is a public-private partnership, and it's a pity Sitsia is not here because I want to give him a challenge. So I'm gonna see if we can't challenge him in the near future to be the biggest triple P, because we are well on our way into that space. So everything we do is designed to be collaborative, and it is all there to do cross-sectorial work, and it's all done to be at scale, much bigger than a single organization can do. So this is just the organizations that's part of Impact Atlas. There's actually a few logos missing. In the last 2 weeks, we signed up some new partners. But what you see is quite a lot of the mining industry players have grouped together to say, well, how do we collectively make a difference? And obviously, the needs in different areas are different. So the whole need around the just transition in Mpumalanga is very different from the need in Limpopo versus the developmental needs of Northern Cape. And through that, what we designed Impact Catalyst to do was to do regional collaborative development, to say how do we take hands and we co-create or co-develop a region collectively by actually pooling resources amongst many organizations. So the focus areas, very similar to ESG, is economic development. How do we create new jobs? How do we create well-being in communities in terms of health and education and social empowerment? And how do we look after the environment? So I think most of you do know what ESG stands for. So ESG basically contains the three acronyms for environmental, social, and governance. To say, well, firstly, every organization needs to look at some sort of environmental aspect. So we cannot mine and not look at, for example, the environment. And we cannot close a mine without restoring it to some sort of a previous pristine type of condition, or at least utilize it in such a way that it creates environmental friendly utilization. Social is looking after the people, but also the people in the organization. And then governance, basically looking at governance in terms of organizations, processes and procedures, but also external processes and procedures in terms of government. And what I'll show you is basically how some of these projects are working. So many of the organizations that we work with actually get measured on the Sustainable Development Goals. And basically Sustainable Development Goals maps quite nicely to the ESG goals. What you'll see there is that not all of them are there, because Impact Catalyst doesn't do work in every single Sustainable Development Goal. This is just what we are doing. And basically it covers all three legs of the ESG, and then basically different Sustainable Development Goals. But what underpins the Sustainable Development Goals, if you start looking at ESG, is the common denominator in terms of Sustainable Development Goals that actually runs across all of them is actually innovation. Funny enough, there's only two Sustainable Development Goals that runs across the three legs of ESG. The one is Sustainable Cities and Communities, and the other one is innovation. So those two are common across the three legs. And of course, innovation actually drives change. And everything that we do is about change management. And you'll see we are radically trying to to change the system. And I think one of the things that Albert Einstein said is that if you try to do things like you did it previously, and you think it's going to work, that is a definition of insanity. And of course, many of ESG initiatives in our country has failed horribly. And we keep on trying to do things differently, or do the same things, and we fail, and we wonder why. And the reason for that is that innovation must underpin change. You cannot drive change management and don't have a bit of innovation in the way we tackle problems. If we tackle problems with the same lenses, we're always going to visit the same results. So we need to try and drive innovation, to try and drive change management, and to get new results. So I'm going to give you a few examples because this session is only 15 minutes long. So in terms of how you actually can look at problems slightly different from an innovation perspective. So obviously, mining and agriculture, it doesn't make sense because these two things are worlds apart. But many of our partners believe agriculture is actually the next way of actually mitigating a lot of the ESG risks. So just to give you an example, and I don't think a lot of people understand carbon markets and carbon offsets, is that in globally currently the carbon compliance market is $261 billion, and that's going to grow significantly in the next few years. If you look at voluntary markets, so there's two ways of looking at carbon offsets. So first one is legislation based. So where, for example, the just transition process says a mine can only produce so much carbon and it's carbon tax, and you have to get rid of your carbon tax. The other one is a voluntary market to say, well, I can create a new farm. I can farm, for example, some sort of new product, and we can create it as a carbon offset, and we can sell that carbon offset to mines to offset against their tax liability. And that market currently is about 6.7 billion, but it is going to grow to about 25 billion rand in 2030. And the reason why this is so important is that this creates a vehicle to fund projects. So in many of the discussions previously, there's always a discussion about money to say, if you want to do the right thing, how do we fund it? And there's different ways of funding it, and of course there's different ways of creating decarbonized strategies. And many of the mines look at their carbon footprint, which is good, but also there's opportunities for offsets, and that's why other opportunities around the mine becomes very important, because it actually creates a vehicle of offsetting carbon tax. So in terms of the picture I showed you of all the partners that we have in the Impact Catalyst, that collective carbon tax that those companies are paying currently in our country is about 3 billion rand. 3 billion rand can go back into projects if you actually invest the money differently in terms of creating new carbon offsets. Significant amount of money that can create new jobs that is just being paid, and rather than reinvesting it in such a way that we can create carbon offsets. So basically, I'm going to show you a few examples of what we're doing, and it links to maybe some of the previous ones. As an example, this is a project that we did last year. It featured in News 24, where we started a project with Kellogg's to do winter wheat on Glencore's property. So Glencore gave us a piece of property. We farmed zinc-infused wheat. Currently, it's actually all imported. And we used mine property, and we farmed with the community to actually create a new product that's being imported substitution. And we used mine-affected water. So we used the waste economy to actually grow all of this. And it was an enormous success. So to such a success that everybody's saying, how do we do this? And the reason why it's so important, because firstly, from an environmental perspective, we're using mine property and rehabilitating it to agriculture. Okay, we're using mine water and we're using it for agriculture. There's a social aspect where we actually get the community involved in actually farming and creating new jobs and create new sustainability, and that feeds the whole project or sustainable development goal of zero hunger. And then, of course, in terms of governance, it actually fits into the legislation and everything else. This project is actually driving legislation as we speak to actually change legislation to use mine water for agriculture in the future. So it actually touches all three of the legs of ESG. And the reason why I'm actually showing each one of these projects the 4 legs is that usually in organizations, these 3 legs actually works separately. You have the supply chain guys don't talk to the social guys, and the social guys don't talk to the governance guys. And that creates problems because everybody is driving their leg separately. Rather saying, so how do we actually go collectively and work on a program that actually touches all legs, that creates much better sustainability and much more impact across the areas that we operate. We're doing the same. For example, this is Zibadela. It's going to create about 2,000 new jobs. And Zibadela is actually a government property. We'll be doing exactly the same. We'll be using government property, expanding the farming, creating new jobs. But what's different in this one is that we're creating this as a carbon offset for Anglo, which is just next door. To say, how can we then get rid of Anglo's 600 million rand of carbon tax by creating a carbon offset? So basically, Anglo is paying the community to farm sustainably. And by paying the community to farm sustainably, you actually create more sustainability in the model. And the tax that Anglo used to pay actually goes to something like this, to create jobs, 2,000 new jobs. And these models are the models of the future. And why I'm showing this is because each one of these got a different level of innovation. So this is a business model innovation. So when we talk innovation, we sometimes think of toys, but we don't always think of the innovation in terms of new business model innovation. To say, how do we structure things differently from a business model to actually create new sustainable things? The previous project, in terms of innovation, a lot of research was done around this with the different research institutes that's involved in this to make sure that we can do food production with mine-affected water as well as on mine properties. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this. This is just another program where we just deployed 4,000 youth. Very similar model. How do you deploy 4,000 new people around the mines to actually do work? And really great model. The lesson around the sustainability or innovation around this project is not to deploy 4,000 people. The lesson around innovation around this is how do you actually create systems and processes that allows you to scale very rapidly and be able to actually create masses of jobs within a very short period of time. So the systems that sit behind this is actually the innovation that actually makes this possible. To go and appoint, take any one of your organizations, they're going to appoint 4,000 people within a month, appoint them, have their contract signed, get them in payroll, get them all the UIF registered. To do that in 1 month for 4,000 people is almost impossible in most organizations. So the innovation around this is to say, how do we scale quickly and create masses of jobs? So there was a lot of discussion in the previous session around OEMs and how we actually use OEMs to actually create new jobs. So just for interest sake, amongst our partners, the complete set of enterprise and supply development amongst the partners as part of Impact Catalyst is about 3 billion rand. 3 billion rand in enterprise and supply development funds that has to be spent by law. It is part of the license to operate, which means the money is there. You just need to put it into the right directions. So if you now take the ESG, about 3 billion rand of enterprise supply development funds, you actually start talking about billions of rands. If you actually pool this money in the right way, you can actually do beautiful things. So this is a project that the CSIR does some really cool stuff on. So we started with a project where we do 3D printing of components, shortening supply chain. So basically, these impellers were imported, and now we actually can print these in a little community SME that sits next to the mine. What does it do? You actually get a little SME that competes with a big guy that overseas just by using technology. The same with these buckets. So we started with a project to refurbish components. And the reason why it actually touches all the ESG is that if you start thinking about these pins we refurbish, there's a refurbished pin. If you look at the amount of money and environmental impact it costs to cast these pins, and the mine, this case Kumba, uses a set of 9 of these pins every 6 weeks. So now you can think, if you have to scrap these pins every 6 weeks, you're going to sit with a mountain of pins. So how do you actually then refurbish it? So you save in environmental, you don't have to cost it, you refurbish it, you save in material, you actually save on cost. So these projects are beautiful because it optimizes the performance of the mine. So firstly, it saves the mine lots of money because you can think how much it costs to refurbish versus buying new ones. It actually creates new SMEs around the mine, with new jobs. And of course, from a partnership perspective, now in terms of governance, because all the mines are working together, it actually creates offset for this little company, not for one mine, but for 4 or 5 mines in one shot, which creates sustainability. So innovation that actually sits in, and how we commercialize this innovation becomes now feasible in terms of how we make impact in terms of the whole ESG space. This is I think my last example that I'm going to give. This is a project we're currently doing for Exara. Very interesting. Innovation around this is actually blockchain. So we're basically now formalizing the whole waste picker sector. So I think all of you have seen these waste pickers pushing trolleys through the city. So we're basically using blockchain to formalize that whole sector. So every waste picker, basically, that push down a trolley, he gets an app, and every time he takes something and his weight for recycling, that weight and the amount of money he gets for that is actually put in the blockchain. At the end of the month, he actually gets a payslip that says this waste picker is an employee of one of the recycling entities, and he gets so much money, and now this person is bankable. You can go to a bank and say, here's my payslip. You can go to Eckers and open an account. Where previously, these guys, everything, they actually don't exist in the system. So by formalizing the waste picker sectors through blockchain, it actually now creates a lot of opportunities. And through leveraging, yet again, the enterprise supply development funds of the mines, you can now put in balers, sorters, and lots of other things to create new SMEs on the fly, creating massive impact around the mine. Then I wanted to use this last example because it fits more on the governance side. We just deployed a large-scale 50 million rand road safety program. And yet again, what does road safety have to do with mining? So all mines use roads. All mines actually responsible for roads and the health and safety of the employees. And of course, but they are not responsible for road safety. The government is. Government is responsible for infrastructure and everything else. So what we're doing is we're focusing a project from donations from the different mines. We're focusing it on supporting a government as a capable state. But through that, we're creating new jobs around the mines because we're creating SMEs that fix potholes and different things. We're using waste material from the mines and we actually fill the potholes. So creating all 4 legs of sustainability for the mine, but it actually focuses on actually supporting government. So yet again, it's not an inwards focus, it is an outwards focus to say, well, by doing the right thing for government, you actually get to tick all your boxes in terms of your license to operate, and which makes your life a lot easier as a mine. Spending the money in the right way. And I'm not going to go through this. It's just some community projects. Currently, our health program covers 4.2 million people in the country. Yet again, the mines are funding health programs to support communities, which yet again is a governmental responsibility, but it creates the social leg and it helps communities and it creates jobs. So in this program, we've appointed about 200 people. So 200 new people didn't have jobs. That's now part of this program. And basically, the healthcare system has got a big saving. So because we actually do primary healthcare and we catch a lot of things, we saved government about 6 billion rand just in pharmaceuticals. And we saved the GDP in that era, we were deploying it about 11 million rand. Just because we catch certain things before people actually have to go to the hospital, because we actually go to people's houses and you actually catch the burden of disease before it actually gets, as it becomes a burden to the governmental system. And the last one is just a lot of community ICT in schools. The last year we deployed ICT to about 104 schools, 403 schools, and we're doing a lot of work in creating community Wi-Fi and community networks. The reason why this is important is because it creates yet again the enablers for economic growth. So economic growth, so investing in communities and access to internet, all of a sudden creates people can actually find jobs. They can start little businesses online. It enables them, because the mines all around the community have now access to sensors, and they can put the sensor in terms of dust sensors around the mine to understand what is the impact of the environment that they are causing on the community. So all of these things actually touch all of the legs of ESG. So in conclusion, as I said previously, innovation is key. So Insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. So what you see here is we're trying to be innovative to solve problems, not about using the same old methods. Let's go and create a few co-ops and everybody's happy. That's not necessarily always successful. So how do you use innovation differently to actually create new future successes? And innovation is not always toys, as I stated. You also get business model innovation, other innovation. Impact Catalyst as itself is a business model innovation. It is radical, and it is causing lots of change management in organizations. So one of the Xaro executives the other day said, previously his teams didn't work together, the social guys didn't talk to the enterprise guys, and now we're sitting in one meeting and we're brainstorming projects and we're launching it. Purely because it's changing the organizations to do things differently, but also the organizations to work differently with government. And thinking differently about the responsibility in ESG and the way that we tackle problems and how we create more benefit. And of course, there's a great alignment between ESGs and SDGs. And by focusing on the right things, you can actually hit all your targets very easily. And then, of course, the last lesson is that this whole Impact Catalyst was designed as a collective impact model. It is much easier replicating things and scaling things and making more impact by working together. So, for example, the waste picker program that I showed for Xaro, that's already something that has been uptaken by all the other partners. And now all of a sudden you don't formalize 50 waste pickers, you actually formalize 2,000 waste pickers, creating 2,000 new jobs. Yeah, you're creating 100 new SMEs rather than just 2 or 3. So by using the models, it becomes much easier to actually get to your targets. Thank you very much.